Ever since I was a kid, I enjoyed animals. Every single school I got kicked out of growing up pretty much had something to do with collecting bugs or snakes or whatever, and bringing them into the classroom. Now, 2 weeks ago, we received a text message from the local media here informing us about a whale that had stranded. When we finally arrived at the whale, it was already dead, unfortunately. Now, when we opened up the stomach, first thing we found was a plastic bag. We also found out from the first responders that they were pulling plastic out of its throat. That animal died because of plastic. Plastic bags have been a huge problem for us in the last 12 years, but more recently we've started to have an increase of plastic soft drink bottles.
There's more food and drink packaging in the ocean than plastic bags. Beverage containers and their caps now account for a quarter of all ocean litter.
It's a Coca-Cola lid, little tiny bottles. Color sticks out. The problem is, more people, more consumption, more plastic everywhere you look.
The soft drinks industry produces 470 billion plastic bottles every year, designed to be used just once and then thrown away. A quarter of them are made by just one company, Coca-Cola.
Per dollar of sales, Coca-Cola use almost 3 times as much plastic as PepsiCo.
Coca-Cola is the biggest polluter in Uganda.
The Philippines is clearly struggling with the plastic pollution.
In the face of public backlash, Coke came up with a bold plan.
Simply put, we want to get to a world without waste. So we want to collect back from the marketplace every bottle and can, or the equivalent of every bottle and can that we have sold.
But they have a history of broken promises.
Since 1990, there have been lots of Coca-Cola pledges for recycled content, and they have failed on all counts.
Coca-Cola is an absolute master of greenwashing. It close enough invented the term.
Urgent action is now needed to end the plastic waste crisis. And as a global brand leader, Coke could pave the way.
Coca-Cola categorically can make a difference. They have the scale, they have the brand expertise to really drive change.
Is the world's largest soft drinks producer really serious about turning the tide on plastic waste? It used to be rare to see a Coke bottle at the side of the road or washed up on a beach. In the 1950s, Coke was sold in glass bottles that the company collected, washed, and refilled.
Here's refreshment you can enjoy quickly and conveniently, and a place to put the bottle when you're through.
You got 2 cents back if you return the bottle, enough to buy a stick of bubble gum. So why did Coke start using single-use plastic in the first place?
Coca-Cola is getting around in big 2-liter.
By the 1970s, a host of fun Coke ads were promoting the benefits of plastic.
These lighter plastic bottles take pounds off your shopping load. And they're strong enough to protect against some of life's hard knocks.
It was undoubtedly more convenient for consumers, but was it also better for Coke?
So when the beverage producers were selling refillable bottles, they had to pay for all of the costs of operations associated with getting the bottles back, washing them, refilling them, etc.
Let's put them back in the rack, Mac.
When single-use packaging was presented to them, they realized that they could effectively externalize all of those management costs onto the municipalities.
You'll love them.
And that is why it looked like such a good financial deal for them. And that's why they went for it.
Coke was aware that plastic could harm the environment. In 1971, a report commissioned by Coke compared the environmental cost of different types of packaging. It concluded that the returnable glass bottle is the ecological container par excellence. But Coke started using plastic anyway. The report was never published.
Single-use plastic is just a massive money saver for all sorts of companies, including Coca-Cola. They use incredibly cheap plastic to make that packaging. They put it on the market and then it's job done, it's gone.
Coke owns over 200 brands, including Sprite, Fanta, and 55 brands of bottled water. And all those bottles add up to a lot of plastic. Coke uses 3 million tons of it a year, equivalent to 200,000 bottles every minute. Nearly half of them end up burned, dumped, or littered. Public awareness of the plastic waste crisis reached a peak in 2017, in part because of David Attenborough's Blue Planet 2.
In some parts of the ocean, it's estimated that there are now over 1 million pieces of plastic for every square mile.
During the time that I've been doing this job, I've seen public awareness absolutely explode. I think it's partly because of amazing documentaries such as Blue Planet that put it in such visual, emotional terms.
The problem is now visual. It wasn't 20 years ago. We didn't have all these photographs on the internet of caps in the bellies of birds and turtles being choked by plastic. We have them now. We can't shake that from our brains. We see it, it makes us upset, and it even makes leaders of beverage companies upset. It's moved beyond an economic issue, this issue of let's externalize the costs where we can, to one of an emotional issue. Do I, as a leader of a company, want this as my legacy?
The thing is that these CEOs get into office, when they retire, when CEOs retire, they all start to talk about sustainability and the environment. Like, why didn't you do that when you were in office?
Jake Backus spent 16 years at the Coca-Cola Company.
When I was there, consumers hate excess packaging, and the packaging they hate the most is plastic. Brands spend a lot of money understanding, their core target audience, perceptions, attitude to life, what's important to them. And so when Blue Planet 2 came along, people start to get very angry about plastic. I feel that then big companies like Coca-Cola find themselves on the back foot. They're now behind the curve. They're now having to play catch up.
In the face of public backlash, Coca-Cola stood by their single-use plastic bottles. They said customers still wanted them. But in 2018, they stepped forward with a plan to prevent them ending up as litter. Launched with a slick social media campaign, they called it World Without Waste. They pledged to make their packaging 100% recyclable, use 50% recycled content, and collect and recycle 1 bottle or can for every one they sell by 2030. With 4 years since Coke launched its plan, can it achieve its targets? And will it be enough to combat the company's plastic waste problem?
So let's just break it down, Coca-Cola's World Without Waste pledges. So the first one's on recyclability. The truth is that Coke packaging is recyclable, whether it's PET bottles, cans, cardboard, all those packaging items are highly recyclable. So that pledge is effectively already met.
Coke's plastic bottles are made from polyethylene terephthalate, or PET, one of the easiest plastics to recycle. And Coke prints the word recycle on nearly every one.
So Coca-Cola claiming that they want to make 100% of their products recyclable is kind of a bit of a misdirection, because in most cases they already are recyclable, so they're not promising anything new. The question is, will it actually be recycled? Can it be recycled in that location?
Buried in the small print of their World Without Waste progress report, there's an admission. Coke says that its bottles are only recyclable where infrastructure exists. What happens in places where it doesn't?
When you're living on a tropical island like Samoa, it's very difficult not to become an environmentalist or a lover of nature. I've always enjoyed Coke since I was young, and one of the reasons I actually was happy to drink Coke is that it was always bottled in glass in Samoa.
Coke didn't have a plastic waste problem here because its drinks had always been bottled locally and sold in refillable glass.
The good thing about the glass bottling was that people had an incentive to return them because there was a deposit, and so most glass was reused. February this year, they switched from glass to plastic completely. There were no more glass bottles, and it was all plastic, and that was a shock, to be honest.
In February 2021, Coke closed its refillable glass bottling line and began shipping thousands of plastic bottles to Samoa.
There was no real warning. And within days to see more plastic littering around the place of Coca-Cola and Fanta and Sprite bottles that were obviously ones that had just come in because we hadn't seen those ones before.
There is no plastic recycling plant on Samoa. To get recycled, the bottles would have to be collected and exported to Australia.
We're a small island and we're in the middle of the South Pacific. The population here in Samoa is only 200,000. So to generate enough volume for us to actually set up a recycling facility is impossible.
Marina runs a small charity that collects recyclable materials for export.
There has been an increase of plastic bottles with the switch of Coke, and I think Coke contributes to 1/3 of the plastic bottle waste here in Samoa.
Coke gave a donation to Marina's charity to help her collect more bottles. And it set up a scheme that pays people $1 for every kilo, around 50 bottles, that they collect. But it's clear that Coke's efforts to prevent their new plastic bottles ending up as litter are not working.
We roughly need about 1 million bottles to fill a 40-foot container. To ship a 40-footer out of Samoa to Australia, it costs roughly around about $6,000 US. We have yet to export our first container, and we've never had any plastic leave Samoa.
The plastic bottles Coke imports to Samoa are 100% recyclable, in theory. But until the charity can ship them to Australia, not a single one will be recycled.
If we hadn't switched to plastic, we wouldn't have created that problem in the first place. We made something bad worse, and now we're having to work harder to fix it. So it's a shame we even went down this path in the first place.
When we asked Coca-Cola to take part in this film, they declined our invitation, but they gave a written statement. On Samoa, they said,
"Wherever we sell our products, we are working to ensure there are regional collection and recycling solutions so that none of our products end up in the environment. To further drive recycling awareness in Samoa, Coca-Cola is launching an education campaign to encourage consumers to recycle."
Coke is well on the way to making its bottles 100% recyclable. But globally, 44% of them, some 49 billion bottles each year, never reach a recycling plant. But Coke's second pledge promises to change all that. They say they will collect 1 bottle or can for every one they sell by 2030. This could make a really big impact on plastic waste, but are they on track to achieve it?
The second pledge, which is collecting 1 bottle back for every bottle or can they sell, that one is going to be much more challenging to achieve. That literally means getting 100% collection for recycling. And we know today they're not even close to it.
Uganda is really blessed. The biggest, freshest water body in Africa, the Lake Victoria, is in Uganda. It's heartbreaking to see that a country like Uganda, that we used to call the Pearl of Africa, we are losing our rivers, we are losing Lake Victoria. When I go to our villages, I see the plastics. I go to the lake, I see plastics. I visit rivers, I see plastics. It really makes me feel like we are losing our natural environment. Companies like Coca-Cola only in Uganda, they produce over 24,000 bottles per hour. That is almost 500,000 plus bottles in 24 hours.
Like in Samoa, glass refillable bottles were once common in Uganda. But the country has seen a gradual shift to single-use plastic.
Coca-Cola is the biggest polluter in Uganda. As you can see all over, we are finding Coca-Cola bottles. This is also Fanta, a product of Coca-Cola. This is Coca-Cola once again, the leading polluter. So all this is waste polluted by Coca-Cola. Why should we see plastic everywhere? Coca-Cola, the problem is not littering. The problem is that there is more plastic than the waste system can cope with. Coca-Cola says they will collect 1 bottle for each bottle they sell in Uganda, but they can never do that. They can never achieve it.
Coca-Cola has a recycling plant in Kampala capable of processing over 250 million bottles per year. But for the past 3 years, it has not run at full capacity because they couldn't collect enough bottles. The plant largely relies on informal waste pickers to do the collecting.
It's informal waste pickers that collect 60% of all the plastic that's recycled globally. So they're a really key part of the system.
There is no one in the world who wishes to work on the dumping site. People come here because they have no choice. You work 10 hours and you earn like $1. They are always here 7 days a week. They come from Monday to Sunday. Small Steps is a charity organization, and we focus on children roaming on the dumping sites and mothers. Whenever they see me, children always come running to me because they know maybe I have shoes, maybe I have something. Oyina emyaka emeka?
Emyaka n'emyaka 7.
Obadde okola ki?
Mbadde nze wano kulonda bucupa.
Kulonda bucupa? Obucupa obulonda obukozaamu ki?
Tubukungaanya ne tubutunda.
Buli kiro bagigulako ssente meka?
Kiro? Kiro bagigula
2.
2.
Like many developing countries, Uganda doesn't have the resources to sort and process its plastic waste. Here, recyclable drinks bottles are mixed with rotting food waste, dirty nappies, and even dead animals.
I don't think Coca-Cola have the capacity to collect by themselves because most of the plastic is dropped in places like these. I think they need these people.
Big plastic creators like Coca-Cola owe those informal waste pickers a great deal. Waste pickers are collecting their plastic, they're preventing it being burnt and dumped. In return, the companies need to ensure waste pickers can earn enough to provide for their families.
Coca-Cola could not provide information on how many of its bottles are collected in Uganda, but it says it's working to help waste pickers.
Waste pickers are often some of the most vulnerable people in their communities. That can include child labor and other unacceptable practices. To help combat this, we recently developed a set of tools designed to help us understand and improve economic conditions for people working across the waste collection chain.
While many developing countries struggle to collect and recycle enough bottles, some high-income countries are doing much better. Germany is leading the world, collecting nearly 98%, followed closely by Finland, Croatia, Denmark, and Sweden. But even rich countries struggle with collection. The USA collects just 28%, Canada 60%, the UK is at 57%.
Typically on a river clean like this and in a more urban environment, we find lots of single-use plastic and sort of packaging. So confectionery wrappers, plastic bottles, cans, the remnants of our day-to-day convenience lifestyle. In this country, we use over 38 million plastic bottles every single day.
We're finding lots and lots of material, cleaning up. We'll be collating all of that data into a big report and seeing what our most polluting items are, most polluting brands are. Okay, so what we're going to do now is we're going to separate all of the branded items out from the non-branded items. Oh, God. You've got PepsiCo, Lucasade, Walkers, all the kind of brands that you'd expect to find out and about.
Surfers Against Sewage coordinated over 600 litter picks like this one across the UK in May 2021. They found more Coca-Cola products than any other brand.
More and more groups are doing brand audits. Break Free from Plastic does an annual global one where we have thousands and thousands of volunteers from more than 50 countries go out, do brand audits, then we compile all that data to understand who are the global top polluters. In 2020, we found more Coca-Cola products in the environment than the next two top polluters combined. We found their products in 51 countries.
Coca-Cola has topped Break Free from Plastic's global brand audit for the past 4 years in a row.
Sadly, the amount of plastic and packaging pollution we're seeing today is a commonplace sight. Until we stem the tide at source, it's always going to be like this.
Coke says it's going to keep selling plastic bottles, but it promises to collect one for every one it sells by 2030. That's a 100% collection rate. Yet according to its own figures, on average across the world, it's currently collecting just 56%. When we asked how they hope to achieve their goal, Coke said,
"We recognize this goal is ambitious. To achieve it requires considerable leadership, investment, and support. This is why we are focused on working with other brands, recyclers, governments, and NGOs. World Without Waste is not about collecting Coca-Cola packaging only. It is about improving all recycling of beverage containers."
Coke's final pledge is to use 50% recycled content in its packaging. This would reduce the amount of new plastic Coke needs to make its bottles by half. How is it getting on?
Since 1990, there have been lots of Coca-Cola pledges for recycled content, and they have failed on all counts.
In 1991, Coke introduced bottles made from 25% recycled plastic. Just 3 years later, it phased them out. Then, Coke promised 10% recycled plastic by 2005. They achieved just 4%. A few years later, a new pledge, 25% by 2015. They reached just 7%. A report published by Coke in 2015 reveals that the company failed to reach its target because it encountered challenges, including low supply. With so many plastic bottles out there in the environment, why did Coke struggle to get hold of enough recycled plastic?
A lot of companies make commitments about how they're going to increase the recycled content. That's great, it's exactly what needs to happen, but it increases demand. And at the minute, we're in a situation where demand for recycled material is really rising.
Recycling companies like this one in the UK produce recycled plastic and sell it to brands to use in their packaging.
These are bales of plastic called PET, the plastic that we use to make drink bottles. This is a plastic Coke bottle, but obviously this is in no state to be used. So the next stage is it gets cleaned up, sterilised and turned back into food grade material. And I have here the kind of material that we end up with. So this is flake, then that gets melted down, turned into pellets and turned into new bottles. So that it starts off as a drinks bottle, ends up as a drinks bottle.
But not every bottle can be made back into a new bottle. Recycled plastic must reach certain hygiene standards before it can be used for food or drink packaging.
In order to make sure that consumers know that when they buy recycled plastic it's safe, we make sure that material that had food in it continues to have food in it. So if something had a cleaning product in it, it's not food grade.
Bottles that don't meet the standard will be recycled into lower grade products like plastic trays or textiles. But some bottles don't make it to the recycling centre at all.
Drinks bottle, you might have it out and about, you might be at a picnic, and then you can't find a recycling bin and it ends up in the nearest bin. Then it doesn't get recycled. Moving to an entirely recycled world doesn't happen overnight. We need to do more, we need to get better at it.
A shortage of bottles coming back means that supply can't always keep pace with demand. Food-grade recycled plastic is now a sought-after global commodity.
When we look at a company like Coca-Cola that has tremendous purchasing power, they would probably have the greatest access to clean, recyclable PET to put in their new bottles, but they have to find the material. And a 50% recycled content target is going to be difficult.
If Coke can't get hold of enough recycled plastic, it risks missing its target once again. How will it overcome this barrier?
Every bottle matters.
Coke has been investing in its own recycling facilities to produce more food-grade recycled plastic. This glossy promo shows off its latest, scheduled to open in the Philippines in 2022. The president of Coca-Cola Philippines, Gareth McGowan, was surprisingly open about the waste problem.
We recognize it's unacceptable that our packaging ends up in oceans and landfills in places where they shouldn't. And so in the Philippines, we've taken the lead.
But just as in Uganda, owning a recycling plant doesn't mean the problem's solved. Collection is the real challenge.
Growing up, I saw Coca-Cola in glass bottles until I think late 80s. But then early 90s, the plastic bottles were introduced globally, and it reached, of course, the shores of the Philippines.
Coca-Cola has been sold in the Philippines for over 100 years.
Coca-Cola is very popular in the Philippines. It's a Coca-Cola nation. They're always number one in terms of beverage.
Filipinos traditionally buy products in small amounts, according to their means. Capitalizing on this culture, Coca-Cola bottles have been getting smaller too, which increases the quantity that need to be collected.
Look at this. All these small bottles. This is the craziest creation of Coca-Cola. So this kind of product that we Filipinos has been regularly bombarded with advertisement from Coca-Cola saying that the coolest drink ever. All these PET bottles are supposedly recyclables, but it's not being collected properly. There's no system of collecting it properly, and there's no system of recycling it in this particular area. It all ends up in our temporary dump sites, in our oceans, in our rivers, so all of these things. In this dump site, majority of the waste that are here, and you can see, are plastic waste. The Philippines is clearly struggling with the plastic pollution. We don't have enough manpower to collect all the waste.
Only 21% of PET bottles are currently collected for recycling in the Philippines. Just as in Uganda, without big investment in collection, Coke's recycling plant is unlikely to run at full capacity to produce the food-grade plastic Coke needs.
Coca-Cola's pledge that they will collect all their plastic bottles by 2030, it's too good to be true, right?
The problem is that we don't have sufficient collection, and not only in the developing countries, but also in America, across Europe, Eastern Europe, and in Asia. So we need to collect the bottles before we can even think about recycling.
In response, Coke said that the challenges around recycling and collection in the Philippines
are not insurmountable, but will clearly require long-term, multi-sector, holistic approaches.
And they said they are
making a major investment to spur domestic recycling and increase production capacity for food-grade recycled PET. We are also launching the first 100% recycled plastic beverage bottles in the country, with plans to further accelerate this in 2022.
Coca-Cola failed to reach its recycled content target in the past because it couldn't get hold of enough recycled material. Will it be different this time? The recycled content of its bottles has risen from 8.6% in 2018 to just 11.5% in 2020. At this rate, they're going to fall far short of their 50% target.
Coca-Cola is an absolute master of greenwashing. Greenwashing is pretending that something is green when actually it is anything but green. They have a whole history of broken promises when it comes to their commitments. So maybe they're just hoping that this one will go away and everyone will forget about it.
When we asked Coke if they thought they're on track to meet their target, they said,
"We are confident we can reach the goal of 50% recycled content as a global average in beverage packaging, based on the progress we are seeing. Our recycled material and collection rate goals do go hand in hand. In order to sustain high levels of recycled plastic globally and at a local level, we must improve collection rates."
While Coke accepts that collection is crucial, there's little evidence of the company coming forward with concrete solutions to boost collection rates. And it turns out there were doubts from the start that collecting and recycling could ever solve the plastic waste problem.
I'm going to guess it was 1988 or so. The vice president of one of the large chemical companies came up to me and said, you know, we're getting a lot of static back about this plastics waste issue. It just won't go away. I think you need to come up here.
The rather amusing saga of the waste barge from Long Island that ploughed the Atlantic coast looking for somewhere to dump its load highlighted a growing crisis.
It may seem odd to you that for such a large country we're having trouble with our garbage, but we're drowning in this stuff.
There was a growing concern in the country about landfills being used up and the growing number of materials that are going into landfills, and particularly plastics.
Facing the threat of a ban on plastic waste, the plastic industry came up with a solution: recycling.
It'll be years before America matches the recycling rates of Japan.
There were many in the industry that had very deep-seated doubts about the ability of certain types of plastics to be recycled at all, either because of technical difficulties or because of collection difficulties. And if you can't collect enough of a product, it cannot be commercially recyclable.
The cost of collecting and processing was often more than the plastic was worth, so the fledgling industry barely took off.
I would like to think that if there had been more energy and effort and money, I suppose, placed in developing a more viable recycling industry, that you'd have a different result.
The plastics industry ramped up production of plastic on the promise that recycling would tackle the waste. But recycling has barely made a dent. Only 9% of all plastic ever produced has been recycled. From the very beginning, the cost of collecting, processing, and sorting has hampered the recycling industry. And to make matters worse, it faces stiff competition.
It's really important to understand that the vast majority of plastic is made from fossil fuels.
Most new or virgin plastics are made from chemicals derived from oil or natural gas. Oil is mainly used for energy and fuel, but to reduce global carbon emissions, sales of these are forecast to decline. The oil industry is counting on plastic to make up the shortfall, and they're ramping up production.
There is capacity being built all over the world to make more and more plastics. They are very much seeing plastic packaging as part of their future, and they want to protect that.
Because virgin plastic is so incredibly cheap, there's not much incentive for people to recycle and to use recycled plastic.
Recovery and recycling of plastic costs more money than buying virgin plastic.
Food-grade recycled PET has always been more expensive than the virgin equivalent. In 2020, it was double the price. The impact of plastic on our oceans is now well known, but plastic waste causes other serious problems too.
Tearfund works in more than 50 of the world's poorest countries. We do a lot of disaster response, hurricanes, floods. In our work around the world, we see plastic being burnt all the time, on street corners, in open dumps. And we could see that was having very serious consequences for people's health and for the climate.
We see many children, especially in urban areas, coming with symptoms of asthma.
Let's go this side. Shirabo, how are you today?
They come to the clinic with attacks, they are hospitalized, and a good percentage of them end in bad outcomes.
Thank you.
Most of this, especially in urban areas, could be related to environmental exposures, including air pollution.
Okay, good girl. 1, 2, 3, 4.
Air pollution in Kampala is caused by a mixture of things. There is a lot of plastic waste in the city. So in areas where people do not have a system to collect this garbage and dispose of it, people resort to burning this garbage. Plastic has pollutants which are directly toxic. Air pollution can cause damage to almost any tissue in the body, but most of the tissues that are affected are the lungs and the brain. The rates of lung cancer are also rapidly increasing in Uganda. In a population where people do not smoke that much, air pollution could be responsible.
Look at me. Good girl. Okay. Open your mouth.
Patients who have lung diseases, they really suffer. You are short of breath, you are choking. People who have asthma, it's like someone is holding onto your neck.
Waking up in the night when she can't breathe, when she's coughing.
It makes you sad because you see someone struggling with life from a problem that could have been prevented, a problem you can do something about.
Globally, around 40% of all waste is burned on open dumps. Research is now revealing the impact this has on people and the planet.
When you burn plastic on a street corner or an open dump, it produces a really powerful climate pollutant called black carbon. Black carbon doesn't stay in the atmosphere for very long, but it has a warming effect so powerful it heats the Earth 2,000 times as much as an equivalent amount of carbon dioxide. So it's a really significant problem.
To reduce the burning of its bottles and hit its World Without Waste targets, Coke will have to dramatically increase collection right across the world. But it faces another challenge. Far too many of the bottles that do get collected are contaminated and can't be made into new bottles. So what's the solution?
There's not enough food-grade quality plastics coming back, and you need it to be good quality and clean. So we need deposit systems.
This is a system where every time you buy a bottle, you pay an extra charge, maybe 10 pence, maybe 20, it's only small. Then you're incentivized to take that back to the shop. They give you the money back. And this is called a return deposit scheme. And it's in place across many countries in Europe.
Germany, Finland, Denmark and Sweden are among the countries that already have deposit systems for plastic bottles in place, and they work. All of them collect upwards of 80% of their bottles. In the USA, states with deposit systems or bottle bills also top the recycling league table. States without are at the bottom.
In the UK, the government's proposing that there'll be a deposit on every bottle that you buy, and you get that redeemed when you return it to a point where it gets taken for recycling. Effectively, you would bypass the need for this plant entirely.
Deposit return systems are proven to work. They get 9 out of 10 bottles back, but they also collect exceedingly clean quality material so we can put those bottles back into new bottles.
So if deposit systems work so well, why don't more countries have them?
When I came to Brussels in 2015, the beverage industry was very much lobbying against deposit return. There are a lot of tactics being deployed that corporate lobbyists can use, and they're very, very effective. They will complain that the policy will affect their business and therefore affect local jobs. If you ever ask the beverage sector, why do you fight deposits when they work so well, they will typically tell you they're too expensive, they're inconvenient, they are administratively burdensome. So this is the fight that's going on behind the scenes.
I'm not entirely sure why Coca-Cola was against deposits in the past. Clearly, it increases the cost of the product. It's inconvenient sometimes to return that packaging, so it's likely to reduce sales.
This briefing document for Coca-Cola's lobbyists, leaked in 2016, showed the policies Coke then wanted to fight back against.
And under the fight back was recycling targets, deposit return programs, and refill quotas. So we know what the sentiment at that time was from this leaked document.
But since launching World Without Waste, Coke has made a U-turn.
They now have changed their position in some countries. For example, in Scotland, Coca-Cola came out in support of deposit schemes because that's one of the few ways that they could actually get their bottles back and recycle them into other bottles.
We are now, for the first time, seeing these companies realize that deposit return is the solution for them.
But is recycling even the answer? Is there a quicker, more efficient way to reduce plastic waste?
PET bottles are recyclable, but that doesn't change the fact that the main thing we need to do to solve the plastic crisis is reduce the amount of plastic being generated.
It's really, really simple. We have to stop using so much plastic. And there's easy ways of doing that, and one of the key ones is looking to reusable systems. We don't have to have reusable glass bottles. We can have reusable plastic.
In some countries, Coke has launched thicker, sturdier plastic bottles. And as the TV ads clearly show, they're designed to be refilled and reused.
In Brazil, they're investing in refill, and some other countries, like in South Africa, which I think is a direct reaction to the public outcry about single-use plastics.
One refillable bottle can replace 25 single-use bottles. In Brazil, they're replacing 200 million every year. So why isn't Coke rolling them out globally?
Reusable bottles requires a lot of investment. They have to collect those bottles, they have to wash them and put them on the market.
Refillable bottles reduce the amount of plastic being generated, but Coke has to pay to collect them, and that affects profit.
Even though Coca-Cola's own research shows that there is 3 times greater brand love and trust if Coca-Cola was to do something meaningful on the environment. But ultimately it comes down to shareholder value. And the thing about, shareholders, they want their pound of flesh.
Although Coke says it's serious about combating its plastic waste problem, a big expansion of refillable bottles is not part of its strategy. Single-use plastic accounts for nearly half of Coke's total packaging. Refillable bottles are just over a tenth.
The fact that Coca-Cola is focusing all their energy on recycling and not embracing reuse and refill suggests to me that they're really not serious about solving plastic pollution.
Coca-Cola is holding out hope that one day recycling will clear up its mess. Meanwhile, they're going to continue selling over 300 million plastic bottles every day. For low-income countries already burdened with pressing problems, plastic waste is a low priority, so the crisis is set to get worse.
I will speak for the entire Global South countries. We are left out in all the strategies of sustainability for companies like Coca-Cola. Their world without waste, it is only maybe applicable in Europe, yet right now we are the ones suffering more from the problems caused by plastic pollution.
Globally, Coke is not currently on track to achieve its World Without Waste goals. And even if it does, making bottles from 50% recycled plastic means they'll still be using 50% of new plastic, requiring around 1.5 million tons of it, equivalent to 52 billion new bottles every year.
Ultimately, I would have liked to have seen that our vision is to get out of virgin petroleum-based plastic. Wow, that's pretty cool. Our vision is to make our bottles 100% from recycled content. Wow.
And if by 2030, Coke has not reached its goals, what then?
Voluntary targets have absolutely no hook. If you don't meet your voluntary targets, there's no impact.
We really, really need to see governments step in. We need to see clear, binding targets that force companies to reduce plastic, that forces them to invest more in developing reusable systems, and to really just rethink how they do business.
While Coke struggles to turn its dream into a reality, mountains of its plastic bottles are piling up. So what does Coke have to say?
We have been clear that the challenges are great. Through World Without Waste, we are hoping to shift the mindset from Coca-Cola being the face of the problem to being the leader in finding solutions. We believe we are making good progress, but we have a long way to go.
Yesterday, this resort that we're at actually did a coastal cleanup for about 2 kilometers of its beach. In the back of this truck is what they cleaned up, 250 kilos of plastic garbage. Let's see how many Coke bottles are in here. Coca-Cola, 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 Coca-Cola. Are we seeing a pattern here? So, half of the bag was just one brand, Coca-Cola. They could clean this beach every single day forever and always get this much garbage. It has to change. This has to stop, because if not, what do we have left?